Weinstein, the founder and organizer in chief of Organizing to Win. Anytime I hear organizing or organizing with the word win, that's what it's all about. Welcome to Politics Done Right, Myra. How are you doing today?
Good. It's nice to meet you. I'm Mira Weinstein.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry for saying
Oh,
it
well,
wrong.
if you
Mi-
speak Spanish, it's like
yeah,
mira, mira.
Mira. Well, hablo español, so it's Mira Weinstein. Okay. All right, Mira. First of all, tell us a little bit about what got you into founding an organization, Organizing to Win.
Well, my whole background is in organizing and political campaigns. And so there was a period where I was looking for my next opportunity, figuring out what I was going to do next. And I was interviewing, I was researching, I was networking, I was meeting with people, and nothing really fit. It just nothing really seemed to be right. And I had a particularly weird meeting at the end of 2019. It wasn't bad. It was just kind of, weird. And I walked out of that meeting thinking, first of all, I don't want to do that. Second of all, why am I killing myself? What I really want to do is help bring people together to build power. And whether I do that with one organization or whether I do that with lots of organizations, it doesn't matter. That's what I want to do. And so that's how Organizing to Win was born, because I
Now,
had this view that I wanted to bring people together to build power.
now, Mira, you worked under, or rather, during the Dukakis campaign. You worked on that years ago. Did that influence, and all that went wrong in that campaign? Did that have an influence on you stating maybe we needed to do things a little bit different to reach the people we needed to reach? Because as you know, uh, Dukakis' loss wasn't really because of what he represented, but because of what others sort of imparted on him to represent.
Well, I was 18 at the time. Um, it
Okay,
was the
I get what she is young, audience.
well, not that young, but okay, thanks. Well, the first time I knocked on a door was 1988 during
Hmm.
that campaign.
Right.
And, at the time, I thought, I thought a lot of things. I was the only person in America who thought Michael Dukakis could win.
I did.
Okay, well, then two of us thought he could
Okay.
win.
Yeah.
But I also thought that if we could just elect all the right people, we could solve all our problems.
Hmm.
So I don't know if you've noticed, but none of those things happened.
True.
And so I started to I did a lot of different things. I worked with feminist activists at the National Organization for Women on these huge national mobilizations. And my theory of change, so to speak, started to evolve. I worked with union members on building stronger unions. And I worked with gun violence prevention activists, and I worked with teachers and former teachers who were fighting for educational justice in their communities. And my theory of change started to evolve, where I started to think, yes, we need to elect all the right people. We need to pass the right laws. We need to have the right leaders, but we really need to do more than win. Um, we need to build power. I was talking with one of my sort of formational organizing bosses. She was the first supervisor I ever had in actual organizing instead of political campaigns. And so I was talking to her about the difference between organizing and mobilizing.
Hmm.
And she thought about it for a second. She said, organizing is transformational. And I sort of understood what she meant at that time. So we have to win, right? We have to elect all the right
Hmm.
people. We have to pass the right laws. We have to have the right leaders in place. And we have to do more than win. With the
Mira, I mean, I love what you just said because earlier today on my on-air program, KPFT 90.1 FM show, Politics and Right, a caller called in. First of all, an initial caller called in and spoke about those people that simply have given up on voting. And it was specific, he was specific to Black men not voting. And, a Black guy called in and he said, yes, he was talking to me. And yes, I don't see the value in voting anymore because, we don't really get a choice on who to elect. Here's what you've just said to us. You've said, wait a minute, it's not just enough to elect the people, the right people. There is more. And I was trying to explain to the young man that there was more. And I think that is what you're alluding to as far as organizing above and beyond the elected. Did I get that right at all?
I think so. I think about political campaigns as mobilizing.
Mm-hmm.
I have a friend who is a longtime organizer who is really brilliant. And he says you have to organize before you can mobilize. And so
Yes.
organizing is this sort of intangible, squishy, abstract thing in some ways, where I think about the definition of organizing is bringing people together to build power. And when those people are together, when we have consensus, when we trust each other, when we have relationships with each other, we can move together to mobilize.
Right. Right. It's interesting, Mira, because and this is for the wrong cause, but it's exactly what you're talking about. If you look at the consistency of, let's say, the Trump voter, the ones that he can do no wrong for, there is a strong trust among that group, as well as trust even to a person that isn't trustworthy. But they're exhibiting all the things that you would like to see, simply, however, on the correct side of values.
I think so. It's tough to make that shift, right? Hard to put myself in those shoes.
I know.
And I think that there's something special and different about that group of folks. And I haven't quite figured out what it is. I think that there was similar um, following
Mm-hmm.
to Obama.
Mm-hmm.
But of course, I'm an Obama supporter, so I think it's different,
Right.
right? So it's hard to be. I'm not sure there is any such thing as objectivity.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to sort of put myself in the shoes of someone who thinks about following Donald Trump the way that many of us follow Obama, right? It's
Right.
hard to make that equivalency.
Well, I think you answered that already, though. I mean, if you take a look at narrative, right? The narrative that these guys, and I get Trumpists that call into my program, and I am very respectful in the way I deal with them. But one of the things that they have, all of them, they have a narrative. And it's a narrative that plays to their culture, a narrative that plays to their beliefs, a narrative that, and when Obama came into power, or when Obama started his, what was the phrase again? Uh, we are who we've been looking for, and those sort of things. It is something that we could hold on to, and it felt real, right? To those people, you know, it feels real. And you're organizing, when you talk about organizing to win, it's generating that narrative, in my opinion, at least, to those, even including those who have a false narrative. How can you bring that to them?
I think about this in a couple of ways. It's the easiest way to talk about it is in terms of elections, even though elections are really more a mobilization than an organizing. But I think that there are elements of organizing that we can bring into traditional politics. And I started to think about this. This is sort of a long-winded answer to your question, but it's how I think about it. I started to think about this after the 2018 midterms.
Mm-hmm.
I helped turn at least one of the Orange County, California districts blue in 2018. And then in the
Orange
general,
County. Wow.
yeah, well, we could talk a long time about that. I also, in 2018, I worked with a gun violence prevention organization on a member engagement campaign.
Mm-hmm.
But after that election, I was talking with someone who was also involved in one of the flipped districts. And she was telling me, we have all these fabulous volunteers who want to keep going, but we don't have anything for them to do. And I was like, oh, dude, there's always something to do. But it got me to thinking, because I thought, in 2018, there were folks who voted for Democratic U.S. House candidates because they didn't like to see children in cages. They're not going to be with us on gun violence. They're not going to be with us on certain issues.
Right.
But they didn't like to see kids in cages. And I thought to myself, those people are not ours forever. But that's because we don't have a relationship with them.
Amen. Right? Yes.
And if we could apply some kind of relationship building, traditional organizing tactics to these communities, then we may be able to shift them. So I was thinking about that and kind of spinning up the organizing campaign in my mind and talking with another friend of mine, who's been really instrumental in the shift that Orange County has made. I was talking to him about this, and he said, well, that's right. And there are also folks that we're not talking to, and that's why they're not involved. And so I was thinking about that as you were telling the story of the caller, because there's also a community of people that we're just not talking to, right? And so, because they don't vote because we don't have a relationship with them.
Right.
So why should they? There's been a 50-year campaign to convince many communities of people that politics is just not about you. Oh, don't worry about it. Politics isn't about you. And we're not talking to them, right? So why should they vote? Of course, they're not going to engage with us because we're not talking to them. And so it's these two communities of voters or potential voters that we're not talking to, that we have no relationship with, right? And that's the basis of organizing, is when you build a relationship, you can move into action together. And we don't have relationships with these folks. So I think there's a whole lot of things we can do to move some of the tactics of traditional organizing to communicate and engage with, these two different kinds of communities broadly defined.
Mira, that actually is not a long-winded answer. That was the perfect answer. And the reason why is the way you ended. The magical portion is we don't have a relationship with them. With that young woman who told you, I have all these people with nothing to do. They have a lot to do, building relationships. And there's an interesting thing, because I'm in Kingwood, a very red district, probably much redder than what Orange County used to be. And it turns out here in Texas that if we take a look at how the mixture of the church and the social organizations get together to nurture these people to the right, to nurture them with things that are not really in their best interest, but they feel the love, they feel the love. So they follow the love. So I think you nailed it. And with organizations like yours, understanding that, because what we have, in my opinion, and you tell me if you think I'm wrong or not, is we have a lot of, and people don't like when I say this, but we have a lot of elitist organizations in Washington that seem to believe they know how to talk to somebody in Idaho or Orange County or Harris County in the redder areas, etc. But they don't. But those are who get paid to come with the analysis. And then a Mira Weinstein is trying to build funds for organizing to win, have to go scratch to be able to do what she just proved needs to be done. So,
well, let's be clear. I'm not the only one who has this brilliant idea.
No. I understand. And I wasn't trying to imply that. I'm trying to say I know a lot of organizations like yours that are doing the necessary work to go out there and do exactly what you said, right? But again, they need the recognition, they need the funding, they need all these types of actions to actually get moving.
Yeah.
Mira, look, Give me a closer. Tell me what I should have asked you that I didn't. Tell me something that you wanted us to cover more in detail. Let's close this baby out.
I think we can't be afraid to talk about power. Power is neutral, and sometimes we get hung up or intimidated out of talking about power. Yet power is the ability to act. And if what we want to do is build inclusive, equitable communities, we need to talk about power. Not power over, but power with. And so that the meaning of organizing is bringing people together to build power together, right? And the key words being people together and power. And so I think that if we have that opinion or that perspective on power, we're not afraid to build it because it's power with, not power over.
Mira Weinstein, founder and organizer of Organizing to Win. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right. Please keep up that great work that you're doing.
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it. It was a great opportunity to talk about the things I love most.
Michael.
How are you, man?
Rogers.
Good to see you, Alberto. What's going on?
And I met you several years ago right here at
Netroots.
The founder of Raw Story, and you bought up a whole lot of other stuff too, didn't you?
Yeah, a couple little things.
What other
I want to give credit to my friend John. He founded it. I got there a few months later.
I thought you were from the beginning, man.
Like, the site is 20 years old. I was there for 19 years and 8 months.
Okay, founder. I'm not going to change what I said.
Good.
I think it's all good.
It's all good.
Anyway,
I just want to credit John.
Yeah,
it's good.
Because I think you picked up a couple others and consolidated it, right?
Well, we have a site called Alternate, which was founded in 1996.
I remember the founding, yes.
And it was really an early leader on the web for different than Raw. Raw's hard news. And we have some opinion, and there's more thoughtfully kind of curated opinion and issues over at Alternate. And people like that, and then another site we have is the New Civil Rights Movement.
Okay, I didn't know that you were on this new that also.
We added that to the
repertoire,
to the list, to the big repertoire,
of what you're doing. So your traffic is pretty large and growing.
90 million hits a month or so.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. I mean,
Thanks.
and how did you grow it from that little thing all the way up to where it's at right now?
So I think part of it is timing. Right. You couldn't start a Raw Story today like that.
No, you
couldn't open up a computer, create a website, and say, I want to start to bring people in.
Right.
Because you're now in a media landscape that you're fighting with 8 trillion other people.
Right.
But in the early days of Raw, John envisioned that we need a liberal alternative to the conservative media that are constantly pushing their messages. I once said, how can we influence the media?
Right.
And he says to me, it's far better to be the media than to try to influence it.
I am going to tell you a thing. With Coffee Party USA, we came up with that moniker in 2000 and when did Obama did it? 2000. We came up with that moniker in 2010 to fight what was going on with all the bad media. That you remember, all the media was leaving things like throw grandma over the ridge or death panels. So we said we were going to be the media, and for all practical purposes, we tried. I used to write several years ago for Raw Story as well. And it was always a place that folks are going to ultimately see your stuff. Because you guys know how to market that sucker,
We have a very strong...
I remember getting a tweet or something with Egberto Willis on it, and I'm like, where the hell does that come from? Raw Story. I'm like, oh, okay.
And we syndicate a lot of great stuff. We work with providers to make sure that one of the things we do is we like to get unrepresented voices and underrepresented stories. There's so many important stories in the country that people are not following. Some of my greatest pleasure is when one of our reporters goes out, does a unique story, an original, exclusive, And then I turn on the cable news and they're like, so Raw Story reported today.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, that's like going up the chain. It's having an effect.
Mine is on a very tiny scale, but I remember the first time I broke a story in Dallas, and it was like, wow, you get that feeling that, it happens now. You guys break stories every damn day now, so.
Yeah, we try. We've just added some more, we were in a lot of investigative reporting. Yeah. We kind of developed more into this hard punching liberal stuff. Right. And now we're realizing we need to do kind of both. Right. That there's, going to be a great balance.
And I imagine you use your alternate platform for the more solid reporting as opposed to less opinion, or?
Well, the alternate is more of a curated site in which, like, we have agreements with dozens of different websites to say, can we run your material? Like the AP, like any other site. Right. What you're going to find is that thoughtful kind of reporting. Right. Not that it's not thoughtful there, but
it
kind of like
less
more
opinionated. Less opinionated, yeah.
The opinions that come from this curation that's going on. So it's kind of mixed in, as opposed to what there used to be a lot more like opinion sections, and now it's more focused on the broader, I think, is what you're talking about. And it's exciting to see everybody work together, but on different entities.
It's important, right? And I think, look, the two people before, I interviewed a guy who said he's trying to unite the progressive space in such a way that we cooperate on issues. Because right now, if you notice, there are talking points that the right has, and they hammer those talking points right through the day all over. Unlike the progressive space, who go off and do each their individual thing. Nothing wrong with, I think, I understand what he's saying. I think we should all go off and do our individual thing, but I think we should also have some talking points at every website is unlimited in the size and the scope of the things it can carry.
Of course.
Right? So I wish I personally, I don't have the time, but if somebody were out there that says, we in this space are going to have these talking points for the day, and we all have a consortium that does that, I would be for that.
We need to find a way to bridge. Like, one of the examples I use is this. The environmental movement wants to protect the environment. Right. They want to make sure that our land and our lakes and are free from contaminants and da-da-da-da. The labor movement that we love wants to have jobs building pipelines.
Exactly.
Right. So how can we come together with labor and educate them about, well, what does it really mean? This 8,000 jobs, once it's built, are 9 jobs of people sitting in front of a monitor.
Exactly.
So when you start to, and that's the kind of coalitions that we need to be building.
Exactly.
And I have an old line. It's not my line. It may have been, you may have heard it, but it's like this. It goes like this. You take 100 conservatives and you put them in a room, and if they disagree on 99 things and agree on one, they're walking out of that room fighting for the one issue.
Exactly.
You put 99 liberals in a room who agree on, you put 100 liberals in a room, 99 of whom agree on everything, they will walk out fighting about the one thing.
But you know what? It's a stereotype, but it's true. And we don't need to leave that stereotype. What we need to do is build on that stereotype. In other words, that is okay, but it's also okay for us to say we're going to concentrate on we're going to give some space to that one thing we disagree on and work on the other 99.
Right. And if you're in that little disagreement space, how do you affect the other 99? Exactly. What do we do to get? And who is the enemy here? Right. That's
most importantly,
who is the enemy?
Exactly.
Exactly. So you're at this kind of inflection point where there's all these exhibitors and all these people, and I don't like you, and you do this and you do that. But at the end, somehow it comes together. But I agree, we lack a Frank Luntz.
Yes.
Frank Luntz, who I can't stand, does an amazing job.
We were talking about him a few minutes ago.
No one's doing that on the left. Yes. No one is pulling together these focus groups. Like, pick an issue, right? Like, the right wing is going to pick an issue, and they're going to use it as a wedge and do whatever they had. The Democrats need better, like the issue of gender care, okay? This is a big controversy all over the country. Right. They are going to make it one of their top 4 issues in the campaign when we're talking about 9 people in the country, right? The Democratic talking point is simple. Ladies and gentlemen, all of this is not worth anything. It's all a show. It's all practice for controlling bodies. And what controlling bodies is about is abortion, 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 and then never stop saying the word abortion.
Exactly.
But that's not us. No. We're going to use this as an opportunity to try to educate Jerry Falwell. As if we're going to get Jerry Falwell.
We will never educate the Jerry Falwells of the world.
10% and 20% of the population don't waste your time.
And the reason I'm not talking any specific technical or political issue with is because there's a political issue we need to talk about, and then there's a transport. And I call the media the transport. And we have to perfect the transport. And that is where we're not yet, perfecting the transport. And people give you a hard time in some of the way Raw Story moves their stories, the sensationalism of the stories. And here's what I put out there. I've learned headlining from Raw Story in this manner. It doesn't matter what your headline is if somebody's not going to read your story. So you want to give a headline for people to read your story, and you're not fooling them. You just attracting their attention to read a solid amount of information.
And I understand. Listen, we live in a partisan world. We're partisan. I always say we're biased.
Exactly.
We're biased toward the truth.
Yeah.
Right. So. But I'm going to give you an example. It's irrelevant to me now. We have a thriving publication. We have 30 people. But when we were young, we would go to progressive organizations. Yes. We went to the left. Can you give us some ads? Here's the traffic. We have, nah. You go to Breitbart. You want to talk about the money being pumped in? We're bigger than Breitbart on the web in terms of numbers. You want to talk about the money that the right wing shovels to their media,
and not only that, paid. Exactly.
Now, like I said, I've had this thing, like when this old ad company messed with like 20 bloggers, right, and took away ad money. I fought the fight, but made them whole first, because that's what's happening. These big outfits are taking advantage of the little guy to depend on them. Like it's important, but I compare it to their successes. We have successes, but when I compare it to theirs, it's always about the messaging, and we do not put enough.
Well, let me just tell you, and I'll put you on the line here, or put you on the spot here. I think with your platform and your 90 million views that you have, one of the next, and take it or leave it, one of the next steps is how to make that. I mean, if it's for the movement, if it's not just a commercial issue, if it's for the movement, that has to be leveraged. There are not many places like you out there. So you need to make money, in my opinion, and at the same time,
gotta pay the bills.
Pay the bills, of course. But leverage that authority, that notoriety, in order for us to grow this space. Because again, if the space is grown, well, you're the big daddy.
I don't have to tell you.
You're the big daddy in independence, all right?
We try.
No. I mean, let's look at the numbers. You're the big daddy in independence. So, I mean, as the big daddy in independent media and so forth, I think comes a lot of responsibility as well.
I agree. One of the things that I think is really important about that responsibility is finding those stories. Right. There was a kid who was killed. Trayon White. No one heard of him. No one knew.
Till
we run a story,
and it blows up.
And then that night, it's on
MSNBC and the others.
And there we are. And that to me is, we're not going to get the credit. We're not going to get some big award. Look, I've seen people get Pulitzers for exposing stuff we exposed 6 months before. So, but that's like the Oscars. That's all so internal. It's so meant. We got to pump up the traditional papers. Got to push that. So you do the work, then they take it. But, in a way, if that helped to motivate the work, that's the kind of stuff that I get the most excited about.
And again, that's the difference between a paper that's, you want to make a lot of money because with money you can do things. But altruistically, it also means that you get the positive job done. Because there are too many, the other side, the idea is they're just in it for the money and they'll lie for it. We tell the truth, and at the same time, we can use our notoriety to make money. And I think as long as our progressive press do that, it'll be fine. I would like us to work a lot more together. I'm talking about the totality of what we do, because I think given that more Americans agree with the values that we support, I think,
of course.
I think it is imperative that we do that.
That's why our campaign this time around should be
absolutely
abortion. Every other word. That's the closer. That is what the people care about.
Right.
Go look at all the surveys. I mean, it is clear as day. But we'll find a way maybe to...
Well, no, I have hope. I'm sorry, I hate the word hope. We are going to get it done. And it takes, and again, with a platform like yours with 90 million, with what we are doing here and here, my little platform with Rick Smith, little platform, and
but you're reaching the core.
Right.
So that's how a site, like, it all builds on each other. And
absolutely.
You know, one of the things, like, we sponsor Netroots Nation.
Right.
And some of my friends will say, well, I don't think our publication would do that. We want to remain in a point, you know.
Yeah.
Really? You don't want to give any money, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know, everyone knows that Breitbart is conservative.
Yes.
If Breitbart sponsors a right-wing conference, it's not going to be like, oh, clutch my pearls. What? How could this happen?
Right.
You know, and we need to step back. We need to step in and step forward and support the work. And it's really frustrating to me.
Well, look, you're doing a good job.
Good to see you, man.
Nice to see you.
And
thank you so kindly for
you'll
being
be here the rest of
Rogers. I'll be here for the whole conference. I'm going to do at least 30, 40, 50 interviews.
Wow.
You know, but I'm speaking to people that are making a difference. And brother, you're not just making a difference. You are tearing it apart.
I hope.
And,
we're trying.
You keep doing what you do. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Once again, Ray McGinnis. Ray McGinnis is the author of Unanswered Questions, What the September 11 Families Asked and the 9/11 Commission Ignored. McGinnis believes the stories of the families are the victims of September 11, and their efforts to establish an inquiry into the attacks offer a doorway for theological reflection about what it means to live in a post-9/11 world. Senor McGinnis, welcome to Politics Done Right once again. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Great to speak with you again.
Well, great. So let me ask this question, because as we were talking, I said, I was talking to your publicist. It was, are there some great updates that we're going to have that we haven't heard about what occurred with 9/11 Saudi Arabia, and why it is that we haven't done much about anything with regards to the people who actually affected this?
Yeah. So these families, of course, were the ones who, if it hadn't been for them, the co-chairs of the 9/11 Commission, Tom Keene and Lee Hamilton, said if it hadn't been for these families, we wouldn't be here. There wouldn't have been a 9/11 Commission. So after all these years now, there are families, not all of them, but many families involved. They want to have a day in court with the government of Saudi Arabia and various officials connected to a number of the hijackers. And you would think that the United States government, the Department of Justice, and so on, would be saying, families, be our guests. Go ahead and take this foreign nation where 15 of 19 hijackers came on 9/11. Be our guest and go ahead and take them to court. And instead, you have a situation where, Donald Trump's Attorney General William Barr was saying, he and the National Director of National Security Intelligence, Richard Grenell, brought sealed documents just a couple of years ago, saying no, Saudi connections to the 9/11 plot would imperil national security, and we cannot have any kind of even the justification for that secrecy needs to be kept secret. And the families are saying of recent years, how can our taking Saudi Arabia to court or various officials in Saudi Arabia and having a day in court, to see, of course, in the court system, everybody's innocent until proven guilty. But how could that exercise in and of itself imperil American national security? So, and right up until this summer, we still have slow walking, stonewalling, obstruction, putting the families off from the government. So it's bewildering to the families.
This is over 20 years now. Since 9/11. And are you to tell me that, first of all, you're still in touch with many of these families?
With a number of the families, yes.
Right. Now, and you're telling me that they are still seeking some sort of a recompense from not necessarily our government, but the government of Saudi Arabia. And as it turns out that our own government is stopping that from coming to fruition?
Yes. In the summer of 2023. So if I try and go for a walk in the family members' shoes, they're just baffled at this resistance on the part of the Department of Justice.
And this is irrespective of administration.
Yes, yeah, and so I want to add that in addition to the matter of Saudi Arabia, I mean you have the matter of the United Arab Emirates, where there were several hijackers as well, and the decision making of the former counterterrorism chief Richard Clarke and his close relationship with United Arab Emirate royals, and he on several occasions he tipped off the royals to let Osama bin Laden know that the CIA was trying to apprehend him, and both. There was one plan in February of 1999 and another one in March of 1999, both in relationship to charges that bin Laden was responsible for the bombing of U.S. embassies in Kenya and Tanzania. And this is a matter of public record, but the families want to know, well, why would you make that call, as counterterrorism czar, when your job is to keep the nation safe? And for the families, they're saying, well, what would have happened if Richard Clarke hadn't intervened to prevent that plausibly successful apprehension of bin Laden in the spring of 1999? Maybe in 2001 he would have been, defending himself in a court of law against charges of bombing embassies in the east coast of Africa and not being involved in no time to plan the attacks of September 11th. So, so for the families, it's just, there's an awful lot of odd decision making by people in key positions.
Now, do we have any recent? Well, let me put it this way: do we have the families? Because we don't hear this on mainstream media at all. At all with whether any families are trying to seek still after 20 years trying to seek some sort of a recompense from the Saudis or the Emirates or other places where these hijackers came from. Nobody in effect talks about it anymore. Is it that they don't get any coverage? What is the issue?
Well, I have been able to find a few places where it's discussed, but they're not like the it's not being reported on CNN. And I want to say as well that even over in the United Kingdom, there's a family. Jeff Campbell died in the North Tower. He's from London, England, and his family over there was trying to get satisfaction to open up, have a new inquest, a new autopsy, a new inquiry into his death. And the judge in London, England said, no, you can't look at this again. We're not discussing this. So it's definitely the families run into things in the United States, but even in other countries. So it's bewildering for the families to run into this resistance in the United States and in the UK.
No, what's your opinion as far as what's going on?
Well, the 9/11 Commission, their report that came out in the summer of 2004 was largely kind of the talking points for what the report would find. Were written in March of 2003 by the executive director, Philip Zelikow, and another person, Ernst May, basically describing what the report would conclude. And it seemed that the families who were surprised that you would kind of pre-script what you were going to find, don't you want to just go and ask questions and then write your report later on instead of deciding ahead of time what your story is? And so there was there was a sense.
Wait. Hold on a second. Let me see if I understand what you just said. You're trying to tell me that when we had the panel that gave the final report on what occurred on September 11th, that they had a pre-written script as to what the scenario that actually occurred before they actually had the research and complete?
Yes, there was an outline that was written in 2003 in March. Now it wasn't like, it was like all the chapter headings and the subheadings and stuff with some notes. And when it was kind of leaked to members of the 80 staff of the 9/11 Commission and to the families in I think the spring of 2004, and they, I remember talking to Bob McIlvaine, whose son Bobby Jr. died, and Bob McIlvaine, this is shocking that you would have kind of a crib notes for what your report is going to find, and the outline and the chapter headings and the subheadings are a mirror image of what the report chapter headings and subheadings are. So it makes families wonder, well, there was concern that some of what was going on with the 9/11 Commission itself was that a report would come out that would not embarrass the president or his reelection chances, which for some families, they said that just shouldn't be an emphasis at all.
Now, how would people from around the other side of the world affect the president chances? I guess I'm trying to figure out why is it that they were so concerned? It seems to me like it has to be more sinister than that. I mean, why would the president be concerned about these are foreign terrorists who did this job? Unless why would they be concerned?
Well, I want to clarify when I'm talking about in terms of the president being embarrassed. It has to do with that the report that would be issued by the 9/11 commissioners in July of 2004, that report would not have anything in it that would embarrass the president to hamper his reelection chances in 2004 in November.
Maybe something like they didn't do their due diligence with all the evidence that comes out that says planes may be used to attack the building, that sort of a thing. Is that what we're talking about?
Yes, so maybe they would say that there were decisions by key people. I mean, the story that we were just blindsided and we couldn't have known doesn't make sense in the face of 14 other nations that gave warnings that people are making decisions on the one hand saying, George Tenet saying, the CIA director saying my hair is on fire, Richard Clarke saying something really big is going to happen. And then nobody thinks that maybe the CIA and the FBI and the INS need to sit down together and talk about what do we do if we think something really big is going to happen. So it's around decision making, and I mean, there are questions families have around. I mean, on the one hand, when it's clear that there is an attack, the Secret Service uses its correct protocol, which is to take the Vice President, Dick Cheney, away right away. No questions asked. We're taking you out of your office and off you go to the bunker. And meanwhile, George W. Bush is sitting for 20 minutes, half an hour in front of a class reading a story about a pet goat, and nobody thinks that the president might be in danger if this is a surprise attack. So there's lots of questions around these kinds of things that the families still have that just were never explained.
Now, how many families are still still trying to get some answers now? Because we were talking about during this event, probably over 2,000 families that were impacted by 9/11.
Yeah, there's just short of 3,000 individuals who died. So then you have tens of thousands of people who are variously mothers, fathers, impacted. Sisters, brothers, nieces, nephews, so on, grandparents, grandchildren, and so on. So, there are certainly many families who, after years after the report came out, have decided to go off to, have a private life. But there are still I think a couple thousand families still involved in this particular lawsuit regarding Saudi Arabia. And I think for some of the families, it's simply a matter, we want the Saudis to take responsibility for what happened. For other families, they're hoping that maybe a Saudi official defending themselves would call some witness connected to the U.S. government that might point to dereliction of duty. I mean, that's what Kristen Breitweiser, whose husband Ron died in the South Tower, that's what she talks about. But I think the families that want to have a lawsuit are careful not to blame, not to prejudge what a trial would find. And I think that that's a good call, because they don't want to be seen as going on a witch hunt.
So there's an active lawsuit that is in effect right now and I guess that is one of the reasons that you wanted to go ahead and come out again and point out much of what you got from many of the families that you've interviewed.
Yeah, there still is this attempt. Of course, at this point, they're not seeing a day in court. There's not a trial date. There's still legal wrangling and difficulties, impediments being put in their way. So
how can you help them to go ahead and help the process, if you will?
Well, I guess I can. I mean, insofar as I here in Vancouver, Canada, can help, I can let people know that this is still something that's going on, and even if much of the media is not covering this story, it's it's important, and people could reach out to Voices of September 11th or other family groups that are involved in this. I think if people do, like, even a Google search on 9/11 families lawsuit against Saudi Arabia, and you did that today on your computer, you could find some links to stories in the news, and then see people like Kristen Breitweiser and Brett Eagleson and others who are named, and perhaps a link to a group that you can support.
Well, Ray, what would you have liked me to ask you that I didn't? This is the second time on, so I was coming with that question.
Okay. Well, I think we can talk about how the family's efforts was this is about democracy and transparency in government. I think that the story of these families, for most people, if you have a devastating loss in your family, especially something like this, your instinct is going to be to be far away from the spotlight, to not talk to politicians or the media, and to go on and live your private life after you've dealt with the estate and the funeral and so on. But these families, of the ones that had losses, went to Washington, D.C., knocked on the doors of members of Congress, and the Senate, and then after they're finally pressed to get an investigation, then they went and they gave the 9/11 Commission over 1,000 questions to ask different individuals and agencies, which the commissioners received by saying, "Thank you, families. These are really good questions." And then the commission proceeded to only answer about 9% with any real seriousness, any deep dive, and left most of the questions without being addressed. But the families monitored the 9/11 Commission, and they tried to keep it on track. And so I think that I think that people, we know who Rosa Parks is, and I think that we should know who Kristen Breitweiser, who lost her husband Ron, Patty Casaza, who lost her husband John, Mindy Kleinberg, who lost her husband Alan, Lori Van Auken, who lost her husband Kenneth, and so on, Mary Fetcher, who lost her son Brad. These people should be studied in high school. This is a stunning introduction to the 21st century, and we need to know their names, and we need to know what they tried to do to keep America safe, and to and I would say as well that the dozen people who were on this family steering committee, representing tens of thousands of families, the majority of them voted Republican. So this was not like a bunch of Democrats that had it out for George W. Bush. So this is about what happens to ordinary citizens when they end up getting caught up in a story like this. and what we can learn about how the media, before the 9/11 Commission report came out, the media was sympathetic to their questions. And then after the report came out, for the most part, there's exceptions like Harper's Magazine, but for the most part, the media circled the wagon, said the report was a great report, and largely went on and ignored the family's questions that were left unanswered. So it's a cautionary tale.
It's a cautionary tale. Ray McGinnis, author of Unanswered Questions, What the September 11th Families Asked, and the 9/11 Commission Ignored. Thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right.
A pleasure. Thanks so much.
If you want to see the responsibility, if you want to see the lack of morality, if you want to see outright degeneracy in a nice face, in a pleasant narrative, you just have to listen to Cassidy, Senator Cassidy out of Louisiana. Why? He claims that he does believe that Donald Trump is guilty, and they think that the paperwork, the where he kept on the papers that he held on to, he said that's a slam dunk. It seems like that's a slam dunk to keep all the classified records. And he also thinks that maybe where they have him on tape claiming that, get me more votes, also likely make him guilty. So Cassidy says, with a straight face, I think he should drop out of the race. Anybody on the stage that goes ahead and support Donald Trump, anyone on the stage supporting Donald Trump in any of these debates would make a better candidate than Donald Trump, a better president than Donald Trump. Great. So far, that sounds pretty good. I want you to listen to what he says there and what he says thereafter, because it's the thereafter that shows that these folks have no morality, no soul, no real patriotism, no interest in a country moving forward in a positive direction. I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side.
Let's talk now about the presidential race. Donald Trump, the former president, he is facing federal charges over his efforts to overturn the election. And you did vote to convict him in his impeachment trial after January 6th. You said, quote, because he is guilty. The former Attorney General, Bill Barr, says that the charges that have been brought against him are, quote unquote, responsible. Do you agree?
Well, I'm not an attorney. There's 91 charges, I think. I think the charge that seems most likely, seems almost a slam dunk, is the one related to mishandling of classified documents. So I can't comment on the rest of them because apparently you have to prove state of mind. You'll have attorneys after me that can comment on that. But there's at least one, which is the mishandling of the federal documents, which is seems, again, a very strong case. They have a tape recording of him speaking of it. If that is proven, then we may have a candidate for president who has been convicted of a crime. I think Joe Biden needs to be replaced, but I don't think Americans will vote for someone who's been convicted. I'm just very sorry about how all this is playing out.
Do you think that Donald Trump should drop out of the race?
I think so. But obviously, that's up to him. You're just asking me my opinion. But he will lose to Joe Biden if you look at the current polls. I'm a Republican. I think any Republican on that stage in Milwaukee will do a better job than Joe Biden. And so I want one of them to win. If former President Trump ends up getting the nomination but cannot win a general, that means we'll have 4 more years of policies which have led to very high inflation, to a loss of purchasing power for the average American equivalent to $10,000, and to many other things which I think have been deleterious to our country's future.
So if Donald Trump does ultimately win the Republican nomination, will you vote for Joe Biden or the Democrat over the Republican on the ticket?
I'm going to vote for a Republican, but my threshold issue for any person who wants to be the leader of our country is, will you take care of the issues before us? Both Biden and Trump both have the same policy on Social Security, for example, which is to do nothing. Unfortunately, Social Security is going insolvent in 8 to 9 years, which means that somebody watching this who's getting Social Security is going to get a 24% cut. both former President Trump, President Biden are basically saying you're going to get a 24% cut because I'm not going to do anything. Now, my threshold issue, if you want to be a leader of our country, is to lead. And right now we need someone who will lead on that issue.
Now, so Bill Cassidy couldn't answer the real question that the host asked correctly. She said, okay, do you think Donald Trump should drop out of the race? Yes, he should. Good answer. Now, if he drops out of the race and he happens to be the Republican candidate, are you going to vote for him? Well, I'm going to. Are you going to vote for El Señor Biden? Well, I am going to vote for the Republican. In other words, he's saying if there's a Biden-Trump race, he's still going to vote for Trump. He didn't say that, but that is by inference. But let me tell you what makes it worse. She asks him, he starts to say that there is no difference policy-wise between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Of course, that's patently false. Donald Trump wasn't going to do all the social programs that we got Biden to do. He wouldn't have had the IRA. He wouldn't have had the student loan funds. He wouldn't have had any of those things, right? Because that's not what the Republican orthodoxy stands for. So they're not the same. Look, we can call Biden a neoliberal all we want, which is true, but he has come out with some good policies after being rigged on by progressives in the party, and they came to compromises. We didn't get all that we wanted, but you know what? I'll be saying I'm as progressive as left as one can get, and I am so surprised at the amount that we got. I'm talking about home programs. I'm talking about domestic programs, what we've gotten from Biden. So they're not the same. But here you have Cassidy saying Biden and Trump are the same. So how can you say you don't think the American people will elect a convicted felon? You don't want to elect a convicted felon. You claim that Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the same policy-wise. So then if you don't want to elect a convicted felon and you think Donald Trump should get out of the race, and if Donald Trump still wins, you claim you're not going to vote for Biden, you're going to vote for the Republican. That just shows that you have, first of all, your words mean nothing. Your words mean absolutely nothing, Senator Cassidy. It shows that this has nothing to do with morality. This has nothing to do with law and order. This has nothing to do with anything other than all you want to ensure is that a Republican is in power, irrespective of whether that Republican is a felon or not. My name is Egberto Willis. This is Politics Done Right, and you guys know how I end this baby. I am what?